Wild Jobs Namibia is proudly brought to you by Windhoek Lager.
Namibia, land of the brave. Brave men and women who dedicate their lives to protecting a country of harsh terrain, ancient cultures, and vulnerable wildlife. Namibian conservationists Dr. Rudy and Marlies van Vuren are on a mission to travel the length and breadth of Namibia to meet these intrepid individuals and to witness the incredible work they undertake on a daily basis. These are the unsung heroes of Namibian conservation, and these are their wild jobs.
Namibia is probably one of the world leaders when it comes to landscape conservation. 45% of the country is under some form of protection, and of that 45%, only 18% is protected by the state.
As a mum, I want to raise my kids without tunnel vision. I want to raise them to have an idea of what is beautiful. Landscapes are beautiful. Be green. Don't leave a bad footprint behind. If you stop next to a road, pick up a paper. For this landscape to be this beautiful will take millions and millions of years. And it takes the human a few seconds to destroy it.
Rudy and Marlies are taking to the skies to visit one of Namibia's most iconic and stunning landscapes, the Fish River Canyon. The Fish River Canyon is the second largest canyon in the world after the Grand Canyon, with an area of 5,900 square kilometers, attracting hundreds of intrepid travelers from all around the world. Rudy and Marlies are here to meet Manfred Goldbeck, who provides tourists with a unique view of this incredible canyon from the saddle.
Manny, so how does it work with the mules? Do you take your mule and then you motor down the canyon with your mule, or what's the idea with the mules?
It's a low impact tourism exercise we're doing here, and that is many people would like to hike the canyon, but they're not fit enough to carry everything in a rucksack. So the mules are the ones carrying the luggage, and so that they can really enjoy the canyon. And by doing so, we got the minimum impact. There's no vehicles in the canyon, and there's also bonding between the animals and the tourists. So.
Manny, how do you guys prevent tourism to have a huge influence on the environment in this area?
Unfortunately, Marlies, there is nothing like no impact of tourism onto an environment. But what we're trying to do is to practice, have a good practice, and that's our policy. Whatever we do, to have a minimum impact. If it's recycling water, if it's recycling paper, glass or whatever. So whatever we do with a conscious to have a little impact as possible.
Through Manfred's hard work, the inherent beauty of the canyon has remained in a pristine condition.
Manny, we've been talking about the conservation of landscapes and how we as humans leave scars on these beautiful landscapes. But we're sitting here next to nature's own scar, and it's just absolutely stunning and beautiful. How did this all originate?
Rudy, it started many million years ago. We talk about 500 million years ago. At a time where we still had a supercontinent, the supercontinent of the southern continents, Gondwana, Africa, South America, Antarctica, Australia, and even India were part of the supercontinent. During this time you had a huge depression, a sea which was filled up over millions of years with sediments, rivers flowing in, and depositing many kilometers of sediments. In these were compacted, and then because of continental drift, South America moved away, Australia, Antarctica, and India moved under the Asian plate. That's where the Himalaya started. And during this phase, the sea dried up, and there was also an upliftment. And then the river started to cut into these sediments over millions of years again. And because of that upliftment, sometimes the rivers were flowing faster, and that is what we see today, the meander of that fish river.
I heard the Bushman also has a story of how the Fish River Canyon started or was originated. Can you tell me that story?
It's a much simpler story, Marlies. There was a huge snake which irritated them. It used to kill their sheep, and one day they decided to kill that snake. And they looked for the hole where the snake was living, and they tried to smoke it out, and as soon as the snake put his head out, they killed it with spears and so on. And in that fight of agony, the snake opened up the earth, and that is how the canyon originated.
And Manny, this canyon is conserved and it forms part of a park, is that correct?
Yes, it was declared in the 1950s as a national park, and when this time government bought more land, and then it became known as the Richtersveld Ice Park.
The Fish River Canyon, a hidden African gem and a truly Namibian paradise.
Wild Jobs Namibia is proudly brought to you by Windhoek Lager. Wild Jobs Namibia is proudly brought to you by Windhoek Lager.
Namibia is renowned for its vast environments that allow freedom for wildlife to roam and thrive. However, farming practices of the past century have compromised even Namibia's largest spaces. Rudy and Marlies are meeting with Peter Bridgeford in the south of Namibia to discuss the impacts which fences have on wildlife.
Peter, we're here at this piece of fence. One side is the national park and this side is private land. Can you tell me more about this fence?
Yeah, I must say it doesn't look very good. It looks like spaghetti that's gone wrong. But if we go back a bit in history, 30 years ago, this area was still part of the diamond area. The diamond mining company gave it up. It reverted to the state, and the state said, what do we do with it? We can't farm with it, so we'll make it part of the park. And that's what happened. And then they decided, okay, we must fence this thing, the boundary. Because, say, going back a long time, many neighbours were, say, misusing the amount of game and really butchering animals. Not all. Again, it's a few individuals. They'd get the game on the farm, and once it's the animals on your farm, it's yours. They'd shoot and sell, and they were, the game kept coming, and there was just an endless supply coming from the old diamond area, which is now park. Today, things have changed. Now the neighbours are mostly animal friendly, and now the fence, it seems superfluous. We don't need it anymore. And what's happened here is as you fence it, the wind blows, the fence gets covered, so you add another piece on, and you add another piece on, and the wind changes and blows it all away, and then it falls over.
Well, I certainly hope from a conservation perspective that this fence someday gets taken down and that we can, recover the landscape and recover its aesthetic value.
Yes, I think it'll happen. It's a slow process. There's also, you're scared to make a move that you do something and then afterwards it backfires, and everybody says, why do you do that? So I'm talking from the conservation point of view. Look what you've done. You've opened the fences, and now they've been ripping the stuff off, they're killing the animals and things. So it's a slow process, but I think it will come. Or open the strategic places, so the border is still marked, and the animals can move backwards and forwards. And it'll certainly be nice to see this gone in the near future.
In areas such as this, where farming has long since ended, these man-made structures become redundant and become a real threat to the surrounding wildlife. Rudy and Marlies have headed to Kanaan, a 33,000 hectare property in southern Namibia. Once a cattle ranch, Kanaan is now sustained through ecotourism, and lodge manager Theo is doing everything he can to restore this part of the desert to its pre-farming glory. Although seemingly harmless, the fences on this property are dangerous to wildlife with tragic consequences.
Dude, we've been driving around here on Kanaan and there's so many fences, internal fences still standing. What's the future? Do you guys gonna break it down? What's the plan?
Yes, we're looking at rehabilitating the whole farm. We're looking at Kanaan, which is 33,000 hectares. So it's really a big issue for us, having close to 100 kilometers just of border fencing, except the internal fencing. And definitely we're going to break it down, because what we have a process of oryx getting caught up in fences.
You know, Theo, this is for me, it's really something that that's very disturbing. You can just imagine how this animal died, getting caught in the fence, dying of thirst, dying of hunger, probably being eaten alive by jackal and hyena. So these fences really irritate me, and I don't like them at all.
Yeah, I get a lot of animals in at Makusi that has the same story, but that people get to, luckily, quick enough. But yeah, then you have broken legs and there's a lot of trauma. But it's a horrible death. I get them so dehydrated, but yeah, you just don't want to see this anymore.
And as I mentioned before, you know, we cannot patrol the whole border area. It's close to 100 kilometers, most of it is up in the mountains. So you find them after a day or two after they've been dead. So,
except for the fact that it catches animals and injures them and eventually they die, it looks, yeah, ugly. I mean, look at this gate. The fence against that dune, it is just so bad on the eye.
But we came prepared, Theo. We're going to remedy that today.
Working alongside Theo, Rudy and Marlies remove a section of fencing, one wire at a time.
Wild Jobs Namibia is proudly brought to you by Windhoek Lager. Wild Jobs Namibia is proudly brought to you by Windhoek Lager.
Humans have a long-lasting effect on our environment that does not simply fade away.
Tiwi, here is another old dam, prime example of just old stuff to be removed. What influence does this have on what you guys are doing at this stage?
well, if you look at this is in disrepair. It's not been used. It needs to be broken down. It needs to be carted away. So we've got quite a problem with all the old stuff lying around. And there's not the need for it anymore. You used to have a lot of water, you know, for your cattle, sheep, but nowadays with us farming just with just the wild antelope, it's not needed anymore.
Yeah, this dam against the backdrop of this incredible scenery is like a beautiful woman with a zit right in front of her head, you know. It just spoils the whole picture. So if you take this away, you perfect the picture again. Isn't that true?
That's true. And the other thing is we move over to solar as well. So everything is now green. We're working on solar. and you don't need the amount of water which you would have needed for, you know, in the past, like we used it in the past. So that's the reason for us just trying to get everything off.
And I mean, for your tourists, does it influence the activities that you guys offer here?
Being that we do a lot of photographic tours on Kanan, that's one of our main streams of income. It's not the nicest thing to have in the middle of a photo shoot, so we try and get it out, and we're busy with planning to get everything removed.
Even something as simple as driving a car causes damage to these delicate landscapes.
We're in the Namib Desert, the oldest living desert in the world, and it just takes your breath away if you look at the scenery here. Everywhere you look, every angle you look at, it's just beautiful, beautiful scenery. But what you don't realize is that this is a very, very soft and susceptible environment. Something like car tracks can damage this environment incredibly.
Yeah, we know you make most of your income out of photography and filming. I mean, that must have a huge impact if you have a beautiful shot and there's tracks right in the middle of it. How do you guys recover it?
Well, the recovery process is a long process. We're looking at a time period unknowns to us, but I would say between 10 and 15 years. The other thing is we have a lot of photo groups coming in. They do shots with drones, with cameras on it. And if you have a track like this coming into shot, it's a no-no. So they don't want it. So what we're doing, we actually block off the roads. We deliberately make sure that the people don't go up, you know, driving off in the field. We have certain rules, tire pressures. We try and conserve and do as much as we can to preserve the landscape as it is right now.
The take-home message here is people must realize that they must not, in an environment like this, drive off-road and drive recklessly with their quad bikes and big 4x4s or whatever.
For sure, that's one of the biggest messages we want to portray and get out there. People don't have to go off-road unless it's necessary.
Yeah, you feel like you've got now 32,000 hectares and you want to say, you're in good hands now, you can relax, somebody will look after you, and that's an amazing feeling.
Hopefully we can achieve that.
Oh, good job.
Namibia's landscapes are at a crossroad. These powerful yet fragile spaces could easily become a thing of the past unless we, as Namibians, actively protect them. The damage caused by human activity must be addressed for our wild spaces to remain just that, wild.
Namibia is such a beautiful country. There's something big and amazing about it. I cannot doubt that there's something and a bigger hand around everything here. If we don't look after it, we will never ever be able to repair it. We only get one of it, and then it's done, it's finished.
We're talking about landscape conservation. Then you come to a place like the Fish River Canyon here, and it almost feels like you've found the factory that makes medicine for the soul. Get this total parasympathetic response where your blood pressure goes down, your heart rate goes down, you start breathing slower, and you just feel the endorphins pumping through your body. All you really want to do is pack this medicine for the soul into a bottle, go away from here, and be determined to play a small part in conserving these fantastic landscapes.
Next week on Wild Jobs Namibia, Rudy and Marlies meet Dr. Nad Brain, a vet, a pilot, and a Namibian hero of conservation and research.
Wild Jobs Namibia is proudly brought to you by Windhoek Lager.